What if I told you a band member quit right before they opened for Cream, forcing three guys to become a power trio by accident? That limitation forged 2 gold albums in 3 years and made Pete Townshend take them under his wing. Then their guitarist walked away at their peak. The band kept recording but lost its identity completely, all while their former member conquered the world with the Eagles. Stick around. This is the rise and fall of the James Gang. Cleveland, Ohio, 1966. While San Francisco was drowning in psychedelic haze and London was refining the blues, a different sound was being forged in America's industrial heartland. The James Gang emerged from a city built on steel mills and automotive plants, and their music carried that same blue-collar grit, raw, powerful, unpolished. Drummer Jim Fox was the architect, the James of the gang, assembling musicians from the local Ohio scene with a singular vision: create a harder, leaner American rock sound that could stand toe-to-toe with the British invasion bands they admired. They drew from the British blues movement, but filtered it through something distinctly Midwestern, something honest and urgent that reflected the working-class neighborhoods they came from. The turning point arrived in January 1968 when a young guitarist named Joe Walsh joined the fold. Walsh wasn't just another player. He was a technical wizard who'd studied music at Kent State, a kid who understood music theory, but had the raw instinct to know when to throw it all away and just play. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. But the real magic, the accident that would define everything, happened in 1968. Just before a crucial gig opening for Cream at Detroit's legendary Grand Ballroom, a band member abruptly quit. They had 2 choices: cancel and lose their shot at the big time, or go out there as a 3-piece and make it work. They chose to make it work. That forced power trio format wasn't some artistic statement. It was pure survival. But necessity became innovation. With no rhythm guitarist to fill the space, no keyboards to add texture, Walsh had to completely reimagine his approach. He developed a muscular, riff-heavy style, pioneering the use of effects like the Echoplex and Leslie rotating speaker to create a sound that was massive, urgent, and unmistakably his own. That high-gain tone wasn't manufactured in some studio. It was forged under pressure, born from the need to compensate for what they didn't have. This was the blue-collar work ethic made sonic. This was American resourcefulness turned into art. This wasn't a band-handed success by some record label executive. This was a band that earned every note the hard way. The proof came in 1969 with their debut, Your Album. The title itself was a middle finger to pretension. No grand artistic statement, just, here's your album. It peaked at a modest number, 83 on the Billboard 200. But something was building. The album proved the power trio concept worked, that Walsh's innovative approach could carry an entire record. But it was just the foundation. The real arrival came in 1970 with James Gang Rides Again. The album exploded, surging to number 20 on the Billboard 200, their first genuine breakthrough. This wasn't a fluke. This was validation. And at the center of that success was a single track that would outlive everything else they ever recorded. The opening riff hit like a sledgehammer, distinctive, driving, immediately recognizable. Funk Number 49 was co-written by Walsh, Fox, and new bassist Dale Peters, who'd replaced Tom Criss and solidified the classic lineup. The song barely scraped the Hot 100, peaking at number 59, but that number is meaningless. What mattered was the riff. Walsh himself emphasized the raw authenticity of the recording. "I don't think that there was any overdubbing," he explained. "The only thing we really added was the percussion middle part, which the 3 of us actually played, putting some parts on top of the drums. No studio tricks, no manufactured polish. Just 3 guys in a room making the sound they wanted to hear." The song's structure was primarily instrumental, a showcase for Walsh's guitar prowess built around that unforgettable lick. It became an immediate staple of the emerging FM radio scene, the kind of song that disc jockeys couldn't stop playing because listeners couldn't stop requesting it. The validation came from an unexpected source. Pete Townshend of The Who after watching the James Gang open for them in 1969, was so impressed that he publicly praised Walsh and took the American trio under his wing. Here's what's telling about James' Gang Rides Again. The album went gold while the single barely cracked the top 60. This proves they weren't chasing pop success. They were building something deeper, a devoted rock audience that bought albums, not just singles. They were an album-oriented rock band in the truest sense, and their fans understood that the real power was in the full experience, not the 3-minute radio edit. The James Gang had proven that a band from Cleveland could compete with anyone. The sound had arrived, and for a brief, brilliant moment, everything was possible. What happened next was a run that most bands never experience. Between 1970 and 1973, the James Gang released a blistering series of albums that cemented their status as one of America's premier hard rock acts. The classic lineup, Walsh, Fox, and Peters, had found their rhythm, and they attacked with relentless momentum. Thirds, released in April 1971, continued the upward trajectory, peaking at number 27 on the Billboard 200. It produced Walk Away, which became their highest charting single, reaching number 51. The reviews were strong, the sales were consistent, and the live shows were explosive. James Gang live in concert captured what made them dangerous. Released in September 1971, the album peaked at number 24 and documented their blistering stage presence, the raw energy, the extended jams, the way Walsh could take a riff and stretch it into something transcendent. But embedded within this triumph was a detail that, in hindsight, reads like a warning. The liner notes for Thirds credited Joe Walsh with guitar, vocals, and train wreck on Walk Away. It wasn't just a quirky joke. Walsh later explained how he achieved that chaotic sound by literally throwing his guitar and jumping on it, pushing the instrument to the point of destruction to get the noise he wanted. Success wasn't enough. Commercial validation wasn't enough. Walsh needed more space, more freedom, more creative territory than the power trio could provide. The fact that his chaos was immortalized on the album cover should have been the signal. The train wreck wasn't just a sound effect, it was a prophecy. For 3 years, the James Gang dominated. They played sold-out shows, they moved units, they proved that a band from the Rust Belt could compete with anyone. But the very structure that had made them unique, the power trio forced by necessity, was becoming a cage. And Joe Walsh, the man who had built that sound, was starting to feel the walls closing in. The peak was real, the success was undeniable, but the foundation was already cracking and nobody saw it coming. December 1971. The James Gang was at the height of their commercial power. Gold albums, sold-out tours, critical respect, radio dominance, everything pointed to more success, bigger stages, greater heights. And then Joe Walsh walked away. Not because the band failed, not because of creative differences that exploded into screaming matches, not because of drugs or money or ego clashes. Walsh left because success itself had become the problem. The very identity that made the James Gang matter, the power trio stripped down to raw essentials, had become a limitation he could no longer tolerate. Walsh relocated to Boulder, Colorado, with producer Bill Simchick to pursue new musical territory. Contemporary accounts noted that Walsh was consistently managing to dodge or postpone superstardom, always seeking creative divergence when things got too comfortable. His initial solo project, Barnstorm, retained the trio format at first, but quickly integrated keyboards and embraced a more melodic, country-influenced West Coast style. Walsh later explained the constraint he'd been feeling. As the only melodic instrument in the James Gang, he had to do everything: carry the riffs, handle the solos, fill the space, maintain the energy. There was no room to breathe, no space to experiment with softer textures or different sounds. The power trio demanded constant intensity, and Walsh needed something more. For Jim Fox and Dale Peters, Walsh's departure created an immediate and devastating vacuum. This wasn't like losing a bass player or a drummer. Walsh was the sound. He was the riffs that defined their hits. He was the voice. He was the innovative guitar techniques that made them distinctive. The James Gang had been built on a deliberate restriction that maximized Walsh's singular genius, and now that genius was gone. the remaining core faced an impossible task. Find a replacement for a guitarist whose identity had completely fused with the band's. How do you replace irreplaceable? How do you maintain an identity built entirely around someone else's vision? The answer, as it turned out, was that you can't. But Fox and Peters were going to spend the next 6 years trying. Walsh's exit wasn't a betrayal, it was an evolution. But for the James Gang, it was the beginning of the end. The train wreck Walsh had created on Thirds was nothing compared to the slow-motion crash that was about to consume the band he left behind. The confusion started immediately. Fox and Peters, determined to keep the James Gang alive, recruited Canadian guitarist Dominic Troiano and vocalist Roy Kenner in 1972. Troiano was talented, a skilled player with a funk rock influence that offered something different from Walsh's blues-based approach. 2 albums followed in quick succession, Straight Shooter and Passin' Through. On paper, it looked like continuity. The James Gang was still recording, still touring, still functioning as a professional operation. But the numbers told a different story. Straight Shooter peaked at number 58. Passin' Through peaked at number 72. The commercial trajectory was reversing sharply. The audience was still there, but something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't the James Gang they remembered. It was decent, it was competent, but it wasn't the same. Then came another lineup change that pushed the band even further from its origins. In 1973, Troiano was replaced by Tommy Bolin, a young, highly experimental guitarist who would later join Deep Purple. Bolin was a virtuoso, but his style incorporated jazz fusion and Miles Davis influences, sophisticated, subtle, often at odds with the hard-charging blues rock foundation the band was built on. The albums produced during the Bolin era, Bang in 1973 and Miami in 1974, struggled severely. Bang peaked at number 122. Miami peaked at number 97. These weren't just disappointing numbers, they were evidence of a band in freefall, desperately trying different styles and directions, but unable to find solid ground. This quick stylistic carousel, from blues rock to funk to jazz fusion, confirmed what fans already sensed. The James Gang had lost its identity. Critics began to settle on a consensus. Since Joe Walsh, the critical darling, left the band, nobody really cared much about it, despite the musical proficiency of the replacements. And that's the tragedy. It wasn't that Troiano or Bolin were bad musicians. They were exceptionally talented, but they weren't trying to be Joe Walsh. They were trying to be themselves within a structure that had been built for someone else. The James Gang name carried expectations they couldn't meet, and the constant comparisons to the Walsh era made every album feel like a failure, regardless of its actual quality. The audience that had made the James Gang successful wasn't interested in experimentation. They wanted that stripped-down, muscular power trio sound. They wanted the riffs that shook their car speakers. They wanted the identity that had made the band matter in the first place. And no matter how many talented musicians cycled through, that identity was gone forever. The end came quietly. No dramatic breakup announcement, no farewell tour, no final statement explaining why it was over. Just diminishing returns and the slow realization that the fight was no longer worth fighting. The James Gang's final album, Jesse Come Home, released in 1976 with Bob Webb on guitar, failed to chart at all, not even the bottom of the Billboard 200. The silence was deafening. In 1977, Jim Fox and Dale Peters finally decided to disband. They'd given it 6 years. They'd tried multiple lineups, multiple directions, multiple reinventions. But the truth was inescapable. Without Joe Walsh, the James Gang wasn't the James Gang. The lack of a final blow makes the ending particularly haunting. There was no plane crash, no drug overdose, no public meltdown or behind-the-scenes scandal. Just a quiet dissolution, the kind of ending that doesn't make headlines. The kind of ending where you don't even realize it's over until years later, when you think back and wonder when exactly the magic disappeared.
Got the feeling, must be love.
And while Fox and Peters were struggling to keep the dream alive, Joe Walsh was conquering the world. His solo albums earned gold certifications. His songs dominated FM radio. And in 1976, the same year the James Gang released their final unsuccessful album, Walsh and the Eagles were becoming one of the biggest acts on the planet. The contrast was brutal. Every time Walsh succeeded, it reminded the world what the James Gang had lost. Every Eagles album that went multi-platinum was proof that the center they couldn't replace was irreplaceable. The James Gang had become a footnote to Joe Walsh's story, when once he had been the centerpiece of theirs. Decades later, the perspective shifts. The confusion of the post-Walsh years has been stripped away by time, leaving behind the powerful, concentrated output of the band's peak. The legacy isn't about how they ended, it's about what they were when it mattered. The riffs endure. Funk Number 49 remains an indispensable staple of classic rock radio, played thousands of times a week across the country. Walk Away still captures that perfect combination of melody and muscle. The songs don't sound dated, they sound foundational, like the building blocks that every hard rock band since has borrowed from. Joe Walsh's innovations during his time with the James Gang, his pioneering use of effects, his guitar tone, his approach to riff construction, cemented his status as a key architect of the 1970s rock guitar. Retrospectively, critics have celebrated the original James Gang as just the kind of no-holds-barred sound that we craved, an authentic American answer to British rock giants like Cream and Led Zeppelin. The Gold albums validate what the audience always knew. They weren't wrong to love this band. The substance was real. The originality was genuine. The James Gang mattered, and the fact that classic rock radio still treats them as essential programming proves that their brief, brilliant run left a permanent mark. In recent years, the classic lineup has reunited sporadically. Walsh, Fox, and Peters played together at the Taylor Hawkins tribute concert in 2022. These reunions don't erase the years of struggle and confusion, but they do something more important. They restore dignity to the original vision. The James Gang story is ultimately about how fragile creative success can be when it rests on a single, irreplaceable talent. It's about how identity, once lost, can never quite be rebuilt. It's about the difference between competence and magic, between a good band and a great one. For 3 years, from 1970 to 1973, the James Gang had something that belonged only to them, a sound forged by accident and necessity, a power trio stripped down to its essential elements. 3 musicians from Cleveland who proved that American rock and roll could be just as powerful, just as innovative, as anything coming from London. The past can still be perfect even when the ending wasn't. The music endures, the riffs echo. And somewhere on a highway at midnight, Funk Number 49 is still shaking someone's car speakers, still making them remember what it felt like to be young and alive when rock and roll still mattered most. The James Gang proved that sometimes the greatest success contains the seeds of its own destruction. The Gold albums couldn't prevent the identity crisis that consumed them when their center walked away. But decades later, what remains isn't the confusion or the failed experiments. It's the riffs that defined a generation. Do you remember when the James Gang still sounded like the James Gang? Drop your memories in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from rock's golden era.